Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week I've got another little project on, which is making some railway boards for my grandson for Christmas. See you in a minute. Now this is another long-term project that's been going on for far too long that I want to try and get nailed down. My grandson had a model railway set given him several years ago, but we thought at that time he was probably too young to be playing with it. He picked it up and started running with it. I think it was about this time last year when they moved house, and his dad put him out some sheets of hardboard and he put the trains on that, and he's been playing happily with that. He started off in the conservatory with just doing it on the floor, if you like, but sooner or later these things start to suffer from getting fluff and dirt and dust in them on the floor, so it migrated to a couple of sheets of hardboard. And when he came up in the summer holidays, we laid out some bits of board I'd got in the conservatory, partly with that in mind, and that seemed to work quite well. So I'm going to take them a little stage further, make them into proper railway boards, and a bit more complicated. I have built one before but this is a bit more complex in that I want them all to dowel together and join together and do one or two things that hopefully will mean it's a bit more flexible for him. Right, so this is the timber I've got that we used for the boys to play trains with. It needs a little bit of squaring up, slight bit of damage in the corner of one of them, but if that's underneath, I think with a bit of sanding we can get a decent finish on it. Very slightly bowed, but again I think the pieces I've got cut, once they're all clamped up, should work well on that. And hopefully we'll get there. We'll put the two big ones, one at each end, smaller one in the middle. They're slightly differing widths, so I need to do a bit of trimming outside with the panel saw, track saw, but and as you can see they're slightly out of square at the moment. So that's got the two boards square and exactly the same size, and all three are exactly the same width now, so we're ready to start and put the framing on. Probably just give them a light sand and then we can start and glue the end pieces on. So I've got my pieces of timber for the ends. I think I can't remember whether I said 6 or 8. I need 6 because there are 3 boards, they've each got one long face, but I only have mating surfaces on 2 joints, if you like, so I only need 4 boards that are all exactly the same in terms of matching up with one another. To that end I've drilled 3mm holes, one at each end, in 4 of them, so they're like a matching pair, 2 matching pairs, sorry. And I've marked those now so that they are board A and board, or joint A and joint B, and there's a face and a face there, so that's B face upright, B face upright, and then the other pair are A face upright and A face upright. So hopefully now all those joints will be in the same place, so it means that if I took out one board in the middle, the 2 outside ones would still match up. These are just like a pilot hole for what I'm going to be using for the joints, which is what we tend to use a lot with the model railway boards. Now these are pattern makers' dowels. These are what they use on the mould boxes when they're doing sand castings of things, to make sure that the two halves to go together without any slop or play. And when they're together, there's a male and a female, there's no movement at all. So what I want to do is set one male and one female in each of these boards at the end. So I'm going to just recess it. I think it's 25mm. I just get a force and a bit and recess it by that depth there. So all I need to do is make sure I'm always working on a part that says face on it. I can then set the piece up in the crosshairs in the right place. Now I think this is a 25mm, but at 22mm I better just make sure I've got the right size to drill the hole, because I don't want to have to go back and do it again afterwards. 22mm, 20mm, I haven't got a 25mm. Let's have a look at it. Now 24 hours on, things got a bit more complicated. I hadn't got a 25mm force and bit when I went, or at least if I have, I've left it behind somewhere. But I just thought I'd double check before I did on the size that I needed, and I've realised that these being old-fashioned English foundry moulding things, they're actually 1 inch. They're 25.4mm diameter. Now I don't know whether a 25mm will be right or not. So I ended up ordering 2 sets. I've ordered a set with a 25mm in it and a set with a 26mm in it, because I could probably find a 1 inch force and a bit on the internet somewhere, but not at 2 hours notice from Toolstation. Yeah, sure enough, the 25mm won't fit. So it's a good job I got plan B. That's better. There's not a great deal of slop in there. So I can drill those now at 26mm and know that I'm in the right place. That's got me 4 boards. They're all cut down now to exactly 1200, which is the smallest board that I've got in width. I've got to trim the others to suit, and if I take the tops are all the same level on each pair, and if you swap out one of the pair, tops also again coincide, so we can swap anything around quite happily and end up with exactly the same top level, exactly the same width. So any 2 boards there are 3 boards, I can connect 2 of them to one end without any problem. So it's time to start and glue up now. Set up in the conservatory because there's a bit more room, and although it's dry at the moment, it's not that warm outside, so I don't think the glue will work that well. I've got a piece of board out the garage that I use as a workbench temporarily in the garden. That's got a good straight edge on it. I've got to decide which I'm going to use as top and bottom on the boards, and I've got to decide which are going to be the joining edges. But once I've done that, I'm going to mark the middle on the boards themselves, and then I can split them apart and glue them right on the edge. And when I clamp down from top right through to bottom, it should give me a dead straight line then. And then I'm going to back it with a fence post, which I'm going to clamp back to that way. And that way I can make sure it's at 90 degrees to the board. And once those are done, I'll do either end, and then I can pop the sides in separately. They're not so important. And then we'll just repeat that now for all the others. Give this 2 or 3 hours to dry, strip it out, do the next board, then we can do the other ends with plain timber, rinse and repeat until we've got all the boards done. In the meantime, while all this is drying, I'm going to measure up the pieces that are not relevant. They're slightly thinner, these. They're going to provide all the diagonal bracing inside. There'll be one front to back and one diagonal on each board, or 2 diagonals into that centre. But I want to just drill some holes in them, not for lightness or aesthetics or anything, but you generally tend to want to run a lot of wires around on the railway, and to be able to just pop them through holes in the diagonals is much more convenient than trying to drill them afterwards. And I've marked out the shorter one that's at right angles to the board with 5 holes roughly equally spaced, and then I've done the same on the diagonal, but obviously they're slightly further apart because that's how it'll work out when we'll get some straight lines through for putting wires in. You'll see when we come to put it together, but there's 5 holes in that one as well. I haven't really talked about materials much because I'm using what I've got rather than what would be ideal. Plywood is best. I've got a plywood top here that's about 11mm thick. I don't know quite why it's such an odd size, but 9mm is usually perfectly adequate for a top, or 12, but the mating faces where the boards join should probably really be 12, and I've only got 9mm, but we can live with that, I think, when we've got bracing in as well. The actual cross braces again can be even less than that. They can be down to 6mm. I've got some of the Tim Horn base boards upstairs that are basically 4mm ply for all of the boards, and as long as you put enough support in, if you go for a thinner top, instead of just putting 1 diagonal, you put 2 in, and it'll just give you that bit of support to stop it moving over time. A couple of hours in, I'm just going to take the clamps off this piece so that we can make sure it doesn't glue itself to the board. Right, day 2, we've got the second board made a start on gluing that up. First one has been cleaned of all its clamps and everything. I've just cut the ends to fit, haven't glued them yet. Trimmed the middle one to size, and again haven't glued that. Just checking out this corner where it was quite badly damaged, but I think with a bit of clamping we can correct what is quite a bad bit of distortion in that one. Now when it comes to gluing this centre piece, I was a bit bothered because there was a bow in the top of the board that I couldn't see how to get out of. But what I've done is put one of the big cross aluminium clamps underneath it. It's not actually tight, but I'm using that bar as a solid piece underneath that I can then clamp on either end, and that's brought it back to being okay in the middle, so I can glue those centre ones in now. So I've got 3 boards now all the same. They've got the centre brace in, they just need the diagonals in, and you might wonder why you'd need diagonal braces, because the board is now pretty solid. But in fact it's because if you rock it that way, it's got no rigidity in twist, and these diagonals will just stop that twisting. Now I've decided to not paint the tops because it won't suit necessarily what we're going to do with it later on. So at the moment I'm just doing the sides black and the underneath white, obviously for ease of seeing what's going on with the wiring. The tops can then be painted to suit whatever's, whether it's brown for ground, underneath some grass, grey for roads, lighter grey for track beds, that sort of thing. So there's no point in painting it one particular colour when it's going to have to be redone later on further down the line. So then it was time to give them a trial fit, and really the only viable option I'd got at the time was to do it outside. They are pretty hefty when you've got a fairly small amount of room to play with. Certainly they wouldn't fit in the shed. There are some over centre catches to be fitted to hold the 2 or 3 parts together, but because these were a fairly tight fit in my car, they were put on when we actually got down to Weston. But you can see that is the intention for it in its normal guise, as an 8 foot by 4 foot layout effectively. But because they've got some building work coming up, and there might be a bit of restricted room, I've made it so that the 2 ends will actually mate together, and hopefully the track will also join up together. We'll put the track together first on the end 2 boards, and then we'll split them apart and drop the bit in the middle afterwards. But you can see they then just go together exactly the same, and again with the over centre catches on, they'll just clamp together and give him a slightly smaller restricted layout, but he'll still at least be able to play with it. Well, that's got the railway boards finished, and that's with 24 hours to spare before we go off down to Weston, so I'm quite happy with that, and hopefully George will be able to play with these trains on top, and ultimately if he wants to and he carries on being interested, he can develop it into a proper railway, you know, with fixed down track and scenery, that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Look forward to seeing you next time. We'll be doing something different in the shed. See you then. Bye. And just as a postscript, this is me the day after Christmas, on Boxing Day, putting the layout together. You can see we've put the catches on to hold the boards together, and I'm just starting to put it together roughly with the boys, just so they can have a play with their new toy and some of the Christmas presents that they'd had. So we had a bit of a running session, and I think it seems to have gone down well with them.